Hey guys, welcome to Budget Commander. On this week's episode, we bring you a very special episode where we will be giving this deck away to one of our lucky subscribers and listeners. This week, we bring you Muldrotha the Gravetide. Muldrotha the Gravetide is 3, a black, a green, and a blue for a legendary creature elemental avatar from the set Domanaria. It says, during each of your turns, you may play up to one permanent card of each permanent type from your graveyard. The way we built this deck is that we're going to fill up our graveyard and use Sac Outlets and recur our threats back with Muldrotha later in the game to accrue a lot of value over the course of the game and get ahead of our opponents. Our strategy in this deck is that we want to ramp early so we're able to guarantee our Muldrotha coming down earlier. And then we want to fill up our graveyard. Since this is a recursive style deck where we're able to play stuff out of our graveyard, we are going to want to fill the graveyard up early on. That way we have two hands, so to speak. And then we're going to play a lot of recursive value. So creatures and permanents that have a Sac Outlet attached to them are really strong in this deck. And Sac Outlets in general are really powerful too. We're able to win through accruing value throughout the course of the game. And we have a couple of creatures and spells that work really well with the strategy that we'll go over later on in the video. We have quite a few ways to ramp in this deck, but I wanted to call out these cards because they're recursive ramp in this deck, which work out really well with Muldrotha. So we have Burnished Heart, 3 generic, pay 3, sacrifice Burnished Heart, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library. So you're able to recur this with Muldrotha's ability and keep getting lands out of your deck, since we do have quite a few basics in here. Then we have Colony Heart Expedition, 1 and a green for an enchantment. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a quest counter on Colony Heart Expedition. Remove 3 quest counters from Colony Heart Expedition and sack it. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library. And then we have Sakura Tribe Elder, 1 and a green, sack it, search your library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library. So there's just some great ways to ramp in this deck early on and then get them back with Muldrotha when you play it later on in the game. There are a few ways that we're able to draw cards in this deck. First up, we have Skull Clamp, 1 generic for an artifact. Equipped creature gets +1/-1. Whenever equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards and you can equip it for 1. This is one of the most powerful artifacts in the entire game. And with Muldrotha, you're able to sack your creatures and then draw cards, and then you're able to get them back with Muldrotha's ability later on in the game. Then we have Secrets of the Dead, 2 and a blue, enchantment. Whenever you cast a spell from your graveyard, draw a card. This card works out perfectly with Muldrotha because we're going to be casting a lot of cards from our graveyard, and then this gives us a way to draw cards off of that. Then we have Tatiova Benthic Druid, 3 green and a blue. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life and draw a card. This works out pretty well with Muldrotha because we have a lot of ways to cycle lands in this deck and to sack our lands for additional value. So anytime you're able to get a land from your graveyard into the battlefield, Tatiova is going to draw you a card and gain you a little incidental. There are a few ways that we're able to fill our graveyard up early on in the game, and these are a few of the cards that I wanted to highlight in this deck. So we have Underrealm Lich, 3, a black and a green. If you would draw a card, instead look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put 1 into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. And then you can pay 4 life. Underrealm Lich gains indestructible until end of turn and you tap it. So anytime you're able to draw a card, you're able to look at the top 3 cards of your library and select one. Then you can put the rest in your graveyard. This is almost like a Sylvan Library Light with Muldrotha because you're going to be able to play those cards that you put into your graveyard later on. So you're able to get a lot of card selection and a lot of value off of this card. Then we have Grizzly Salvage, black and a green for an instant. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a creature or land card from among them into your hand. Put the rest into your graveyard. Again, this is effectively going to draw you several cards with this spell, and you're able to select the best one. Then we have Vessel of Nascency, 1 green for an enchantment. Pay 1 and a green, sacrifice Vessel of Nascency, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker card from among them into your hand. Put the rest into your graveyard. So again, this is a great way that we're able to pick out our best spell that we can use right now. Then we're able to fill our yard and play some stuff off of Muldrotha later on in the game too. We have quite a few cards in this deck that are able to help us interact with our opponents and control the game early on. So we have Acidic Slime, 3, a green and a green. When Acidic Slime enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. ETB effects in this deck are really great because you can play your acidic slime, and then later on, if it dies or you're able to sack it for value, then you can play it again to destroy another artifact or enchantment. Then we have Shriek Maw. When Shriek Maw enters the battlefield, destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. And this has Evoke for 1 and a black. So you can cast this spell for its Evoke cost. If you do sacrifice it when it enters the battlefield, you're almost always going to play this for its Evoke cost in this deck because you want your creature to die and go back into the graveyard, so that way you're able to play it again with Muldrotha. Then we have Meteor Golem, 7 generic mana. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-land permanent and opponent controls. This card's great because you're able to target any non-land permanent that your opponents have that may be problematic. And then again, if you're able to sacrifice this later, you can get it back to do it again. The next 3 cards in this deck all do pretty much the same thing, and I like to classify these as recursive removal. So we have Merciless Executioner, Fleshbag Marauder, and Plague Crafter. They all cost the same, 2 and a black. And when they enter the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature. The only difference here with Plague Crafter is they could also sacrifice a Planeswalker, and if they can't, they discard a card. So when you play these early on in the game, you're able to get rid of some problematic creatures that your opponents may have, especially ones that may have hexproof or indestructible, those type of things, and get them off the board. And then you're able to get them back with Muldrotha and play them later on in the game when you cast it. The next 3 artifacts and enchantments in this deck fill the same kind of role as the last creatures do, in that you're able to get them back later on with Muldrotha and accrue value throughout the game by recurring them. So we have Executioner's Capsule, 1 black for an artifact, 1 and a black, tap it, sack Executioner's Capsule, destroy target non-black creature. Then we have Seal of Doom, 2 and a black for an enchantment, sack Seal of Doom, destroy target non-black creature, it can't be regenerated. And then we have Seal of Primordium, 1 and a green for an enchantment, sack it, destroy target artifact or enchantment. The next category I like to call Sack for Value, and these are permanents that have a sacrifice ability attached to them that you're able to sacrifice throughout the game and recur later with Muldrotha. So we have Siren Storm Tamer, 1 blue, and it has an ability, pay a blue, sacrifice Siren Storm Tamer, counter target spell or ability that targets a creature you control. You're able to blank a removal spell with this and maybe protect your Muldrotha later on in the game. Then we have Spore Frog, 1 green, sacrifice Spore Frog, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. This card's really annoying because you can keep getting it back throughout the game and prevent combat damage from any player. So this works out really well if you have somebody that's gunning for you in the game. Then we have Muldrifter, 4 and a blue, enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards. And then it has Evoke, 2 and a blue. You may cast this spell for its Evoke cost. If you do, it's sacrificed when it enters the battlefield. Again, like the other Evoke creature earlier on in the video, you're almost always going to play this for its Evoke cost because it has the sacrifice built in, and you're able to get it back later on with Muldrotha. Then we have Caustic Caterpillar, 1 green, and it has an ability, 1 and a green, sacrifice Caustic Caterpillar, destroy target artifact or enchantment. And then we have Thrashing Brontodon, 1 green, has the same ability, pay 1, sack Thrashing Brontodon, destroy target artifact or enchantment. And then we have Nihil Spellbomb, 1 generic mana for an artifact, tap it, sacrifice Nihil Spellbomb, exile all cards from target player's graveyard. When it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay a black. If you do, draw a card. So this is a good way to fight other graveyard recursion decks in this format. No graveyard deck would be complete without Sac Outlets, and we have a couple of really great Sac Outlets in this deck. First up, we have Greater Good, 2 a green and a green for an enchantment. Sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to the sacrifice creature's power, then discard 3 cards. This is really great because you're able to churn through your deck, sack your creatures, get them back later, and rinse and repeat. Then we have Viscera Seer, 1 black for a creature, and it says sack a creature, scry 1. So it's just a really cheap sacrifice outlet that you're able to sack your creatures and get them back later on. Then we have Ashnod's Altar, 3 generic mana for an artifact. Sacrifice a creature, add 2 generic to your mana pool. So this is a way that you're able to sack your creatures and also ramp up. There's a fairly new card type that works out really well with Muldrotha, and they're Sagas, which are from Domanaria. So let me read what Sagas do. As this saga enters, and after your draw step, add a lore counter. Sacrifice it after 3. So with Sagas, you don't mind sacrificing them because you can just get them back later because of Muldrotha. And these all have a very powerful effect on the battlefield. Mending of Domanaria is 3 green. Put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And this will go on 1 and 2. And then on 3, return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Then shuffle your graveyard into your library. So this is really powerful. If you have a full graveyard that's full of lands, you're able to get them all back and put them all into the battlefield, which is extremely powerful. And then we have the Eldest Reborn, 4 and a black. On 1, each opponent sacks a creature or planeswalker. On 2, each opponent discards a card. And on 3, put target creature or planeswalker card from any graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So you're able to get back one of your creatures, or if your opponents have a more powerful creature or planeswalker in their graveyard, you're able to steal one of theirs. Let's talk about one of the all-stars in this deck. So we have Journey to Eternity, 1, a black and a green, for a legendary enchantment aura. And it says, enchant creature you control. When enchanted creature dies, return it to the battlefield under your control, then return Journey to Eternity to the battlefield transformed under your control. So this is able to save one of your creatures if it's about to die and return it to the battlefield. And this works really well with ETB effects too, because you'll get the second ETB. And then when it flips, it becomes Atzel, Cave of Eternity. It's a legendary land. And then you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, or tap 3 a black and a green and tap it, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this gives you some redundancy. If your Muldrotha isn't on the battlefield or somebody kills it, you're still able to return some of your creatures from your graveyard to the battlefield to get that additional value with this card as well. Next up, we have one of the best removal spells in this deck, and it's Pernicious Deed. 1 a black and a green for an enchantment. Pay X, sacrifice Pernicious Deed, destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with converted mana cost X or less. So you're able to keep returning this from your graveyard and use it as a mass removal spell for your opponent's permanents, and it's going to destroy almost everything on the battlefield. Let's talk about a few of the ways that we're able to win this game. So the way we're able to win this game is by accruing value over the long term and by controlling the board with all of our interaction and recursive removal that we have in this deck. But we do have a couple of creatures that will put us into a position where we're able to win quickly. So we have Izoni, Thousand-Eyed, 2 black, green for a legendary creature, Elf Shaman. It has Undergrowth. When Izoni Thousand-Eyed enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 black and green insect creature token for each creature card in your graveyard. Then you can pay a black and a green, sacrifice another creature, you gain 1 life, and draw a card. So not only is this really powerful because you're able to create a bunch of tokens when this comes into play, because your graveyard is going to be filled with creatures, you're also able to sack your creatures and gain a life and draw a card. So this has a Sac Outlet built into it that gives you additional value. Then we have Gerard, Golgari Lichlord, black, green for a legendary creature, zombie elf. Gerard Golgari Lichlord has +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. And then it has pay 1 a black and a green, sacrifice another creature. Each opponent loses life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. And then you can return this from your graveyard if you sack a swamp in a forest. So this creature is going to get really big because you're going to have a ton of creatures in your graveyard. So you're able to swing in with this for a lot of damage. But it also has a way that you're able to get around some pesky blockers and sack some of your creatures to have all of your opponents lose life equal to its power. Then we have Sidisi Brood Tyrant, 1 a black, a green, and a blue for a legendary creature, Naga Shaman. Whenever Sidisi Brood Tyrant enters the battlefield or attacks, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Whenever 1 or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from your library, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. So this helps you out in 2 ways. First, it's going to help you fill your graveyard up, and then it's going to help you by putting a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield anytime a creature goes from your library into your graveyard, which will happen quite often in this deck. Then we have Avenger of Zendikar, 5 green for a creature elemental. When it enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 green plant creature token for each land you control. And then it has Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a +1/+1 counter on each plant creature token you control. So this works out really well in this deck because you're going to ramp early on, so you'll have a lot of lands on the battlefield. And Avenger of Zendikar is just a classic finisher in any green deck. Then you have Gonti, Lord of Luxury, 2 black for a legendary creature, Aetherborn Rogue, that has Death Touch. When Gonti, Lord of Luxury, enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of target opponent's library, exile one of them face down, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. For as long as that card remains exiled, you may look at it, you may cast it, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast it. So while you don't have any combos in this deck, you may be able to pick up one of your opponent's combo pieces off of Gonti, Lord of Luxury. And since you're able to sack this creature and get it back later on, who knows, you may actually get 2 combo pieces and able to win the game with your opponent's spells, which is even more satisfying. So let's go into the details of how to win this week's deck. So there's 2 ways to earn entries into the contest. The first is by being a subscriber to our YouTube channel. So thank you to those who have already subscribed. If you haven't already, please give us a subscribe, as that will give you an entry into the contest. And the second way is by commenting on any of our YouTube videos. Anyone that's already commented on our YouTube videos will automatically get an entry, and anyone that's subscribed automatically gets an entry as well. Check the show notes down below for all the contest details. The contest will run 30 days from the posting of this video, and we will set up a live stream 30 days from now to announce the winner on air. Please take a second to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. It's a great way to support the show and ensure that we can continue making videos in the future.